is the news and talk of Texas. Now, it's the Rick Roberts Show on 820 AM, 99.5 FM, HD2, News Talk 820, WBAP.
Well, I know there's got to be a few 100 million more like me, just trying to keep it free. Yeah.
Rick Roberts starts right now.
2:03 the time. Good afternoon. I'm Rick Roberts. This is the Court of Public Opinion. Your voice, your opinion, your attitude on the issues of the day. It's Monday, man. It takes me about 10 minutes to learn how to talk. How you doing, David? Doing all right?
I'm doing great.
Yeah, good.
Back in the saddle again.
Back in the saddle.
There we go.
David was traveling. I very rarely, if ever, read from prepared text. I figure most of my audience, if not the vast majority, can read for yourself. But this is a little different. The final solution for Farrakhan. And the reason I want to give you this is, number one, to find out where you come down on this. But number two, I have the author as a guest in just a little bit. Now, you have seen him on CNN, on Fox. He's on Fox all the time. I want to talk about the younger sister of convicted mass murderer Dylan Roof. This was that human waste of space that walked into the church and killed 9 black folks. And I think he's on death row now in Indiana. The craziness doesn't fall too far from the tree. The younger sister of this convicted mass murderer, Dylan Roof, who gunned down 9 parishioners in Charleston, South Carolina. His sister was arrested this past Wednesday on drug and weapons charges after she posted a message on social media that I couldn't even read because of the words used. First of all, nice language. Gosh, wouldn't mom be proud if someone were dating you? Morgan Roof, she's 18. She's a student at AC Flora High School in Columbia. She was charged with 1 count of marijuana possession. I'm not too concerned about that. 2 counts of carrying a weapon on school grounds. But I'm more concerned about what she did on social media. The weapons she had were a knife and pepper spray. I don't call pepper spray a weapon, really. And I don't know what kind of knife it was. Was it a pocket knife? Was it a Crocodile Dundee saber? I don't know. But what was troubling was the social media she went to. She posted several messages to Snapchat saying that she hoped the students participating in the walkout of classes to protest gun violence would get shot, and suggested that only black people would be participating in the protest, which obviously wasn't true. You're walking out of the allowed time of 17 minutes. They're letting you do this. Nothing is going to change. What do you think it's going to do? I hope it's a trap and y'all get shot. We know it's fixing to be nothing but black people walking out anyway. Her brother, Dylan Roof, is a self-avowed white supremacist. Sounds like she's following in the footsteps. Sheriff Leon Lott said that after learning of that post, the school staff called the school. And almost immediately, I got a call from what sounded like a young woman. Well, a knife isn't a weapon, this isn't a weapon, and yes, white students are, under fire. And I thought, good Lord. What if Dylan would have posted this kind of stuff? Would we have taken that seriously? See, everybody's bemoaning, this poor 18-year-old girl, she's, suffering because of her brother. Well, luck. Had we had this type of red flag for Dylan, maybe 9 parishioners would be alive today. Maybe they wouldn't, but maybe they would. So, spare me the hugs and kisses. Well, she's just a poor 18-year-old white girl, and she didn't do anything wrong. She shouldn't be punished for her brother's actions. Well, she's not being punished for her brother's actions. He's on death row. She was released, I think, on a $5,000 bond with a condition. Now, don't you go back to that school. Don't you hear me, young lady? And I'm thinking to myself, good Lord, Even when we've got the information in front of us, we still take the line of least resistance. Susan Childs is the principal at AC Flora. She said in a statement to parents and students, as many of you know, today was set for a time for the walkout, blah, blah, blah. And then a student used social media to post a hateful message. The posting was not a threat, was extremely inappropriate. Okay, well, I hope you walk out, it's a trap, and you all get shot. Well, given the fact that she comes from a family of mass murderers, her brother, maybe you should take it a little bit seriously. Just err on the side of being cautious and vigilant. I don't know what they're learning at home, but obviously it's not something that is helpful to the rest of the community. That student was dealt with in a swift and severe manner, and the posting caused quite a disruption. Well, the governor of South Carolina said, it was a potential tragedy was avoided. And a lot of people said that was an overstatement. I don't know whether it was or not, nor does anyone else. But let's see. Your brother just, in cold blood, walked into a church, killed 9 people. He's an avowed white supremacist. And basically your postings are echoing that type of mindset. So, yeah, excuse us if we're a little concerned. Dylan Roof, like I said, self-avowed white supremacist, killed 9 black parishioners during a Bible study. And like I said, he's on death row in, I think it's Indiana. Doesn't matter where. We're going to talk about that at length in just a little bit. I couldn't believe that people came to her defense almost immediately without even knowing the facts of the case, other than what I've read you. Well, she's just a poor, white girls are under all kinds of pressure in high school. And wait a minute, what? Did you know white people are being attacked in high school?
I had no clue.
I didn't either. News to me.
I'll let my son know that also.
Yeah, please let your son know that. Yeah, look, high school's tough for anybody. Black, white, short, tall, fat, thin, men, women, it doesn't matter. It's a tough place to be. But I'm sorry. I think parents have some culpability. I do. I mean, you have to demonstrate proficiency for just about anything else. Drive a car, fly a plane, all kinds of trades in construction. But any fool can spit out kids like a Pez dispenser. And I don't know. It doesn't look to me like anything can happen with any kid at any time. I'll give you that. But if you're turning out white supremacist kids that go in and mass murder, maybe you ought to buy a book on parenting, something, or just stop having kids. How about that? And Morgan looks like she's going down the same path that her brother went down. All right. When we come back, the final solution for Farrakhan, I'll give you this. We'll also take your calls on Morgan Roof. I think it was appropriate. They arrested her, checked everything out. Maybe the parents ought to go through the bedroom just to make sure. And then she was released on $5,000 bail. I personally think it came a little too quick. I mean, given what goes on in that family, I think maybe you should have waited a little bit. All right, 1-800-288-WBAP, 1-800-288-9227. Your calls straight ahead. All right, 17 minutes after the hour, 2:17 the time. I'm Rick Roberts. Hope you had a great weekend. Back into it. The final solution for Farrakhan coming up in just a moment or two. Let's go to James in Dallas. James, thank you for waiting. I appreciate it. How you doing, James?
I'm doing pretty well today, sir. How are you?
I'm good.
Fantastic. Hey, you said something just a moment ago, and I just want to let you know I listen to you pretty frequently, and I normally agree with almost everything you say. But you made a comment, and I'm sure it was in jest. You said something, hey, white people don't get bullied in school or they don't get mistreated, and
I was being satirical. You had to hear that. You had to hear that young girl's call. And that's my bad. If you didn't hear it, it was it was something.
Obviously, I figured there was some context behind it that I missed. What I was going to say was, there's a culture, either it has been or it's kind of definitely become a lot more popular now. That basically, if you're white, you're part of an evil class of people for some reason. Especially if you're a white conservative, and I don't think that everybody always understands that. But at least in school, and I definitely remember going to school and basically being a minority, and the majority of the people that went through my school were African American, Mexican, and I'm a live and let live kind of guy. But basically, I was singled out. Well, not just for me specifically, but anybody that went to that school that wasn't part of the majority, we were singled out and we were mistreated. And basically, there was a lot of hatred against us. And it wasn't as though we were part of the majority inside of the school and rolling around everywhere. And I feel, at least I experienced it at any rate, that there's this culture of, if you're white, you're one of the bad people. And you can be a moderate, you can be respectful of things that happened in the past, and you can want to move forward and treat everybody equally and fairly. But from what I've seen, it doesn't matter what your viewpoints are or anything. It's just, if you're white, you're evil.
Well, let's look at. I don't know if it's trickled down to the school level. Certainly, after 8 years of Obama, as a society, first we tried to throw all law enforcement under the bus. I think that was an effort to try and federalize law enforcement. Didn't work. I've said this before. Bullies are going to be in school forever. I don't care how many no bullying zone signs you put up. It doesn't matter. I mean, you and I both know. I don't care what color you are. You're going to get bullied.
Absolutely.
I was very fortunate to be raised by my grandparents, and when they got too old, went off to a boys' ranch. And I've told this story. They used to bus us on the ranch bus from the boys' ranch to the Lake Tenkiller Park, where we would be met by the Vian school bus. We would change buses, and then they would bus us into school, right? And every single day, just like clockwork, there was always a group. I mean, just get ready for it. I mean, because you're going to have to fight your way into school. We were the ranch boys, and we were the bad guys, evidently, even though I was there because I didn't have a place to live. Didn't matter. They didn't like us. Quite honestly, we didn't like them. But I played football, so I got along with guys, and I kind of was on the peripheral of that. But some of these poor guys, I mean, every single day, it was, fight your way into the school and then don't leave until it's time to go home. That was bad. But, nobody jumped out and picked up a weapon and started killing people. You just you took care of things. And what we're seeing today, I think, is a societal shift where, there is no consequence for action. There's no value in human life. Separate us by race, separate it by height. Any way we can get separated, we try and do that. And I think that's what we're seeing.
Well, I can't but agree with you. Like I said, I agree with almost everything you say for the most part, and I think you hit the nail on the head on that one. I really appreciate you taking my call, Mr. Roberts.
All right, my friend. I'll look forward to the next call. When we come back, because I don't want to. Well, do I have time to start this? Yeah, I do. As I said, I very seldom, if ever, read to you from a prepared text, but I think this is important. Not my words. Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson, as you've seen on Fox News and CNN, and he's all over the place, Newsmax. The final solution for Farrakhan. As we look into race in America, I mean, for 8 years, we were separated by, the highest office in the land. I mean, you can argue that fact, but I mean, look at what happened. I don't know that race relations were ever as bad. Well, of course, I was too young for the civil rights movement. Obviously, they were worse then. But let me give you this, and I want to take your calls on it. All right. Final solution for Farrakhan. Demagogue Louis Farrakhan's at it again. The Nation of Islam leader delivered an incendiary speech at Savior's Day 2018. It's an annual gathering for his followers in Chicago. He attacked whites, he attacked Jews, he attacked President Trump. He said, white folks are going down, and Satan is going down, and Farrakhan, by God's grace, has pulled the cover off that satanic Jew, and I'm here to say your time is up, your world is through. You can tell this is going to be an uplifting speech, right? The breakdown of the black family in the absence of strong moral black men has created a vacuum within the black community that has allowed evil like Farrakhan to rise to power. Again, this is authored by Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson. You'll have a chance to talk to him coming up here in just a little bit. For decades, he continues, Farrakhan and his Nation of Islam have intimidated and exploited black Americans to gain power and wealth. Farrakhan has close ties with the members of the Congressional Black Caucus and black entertainers, which gives him clout. Grammy award-winning singer Stephanie Mills performed at his recent event. She praised Farrakhan for mentoring her and bowed at his feet. Tamika Mallory, one of the heads of the Women's March organization, also attended the Savior's Day event, and Farrakhan publicly acknowledged her. Despite mounting pressure to denounce Farrakhan, Mallory doubled down. She issued a statement defending her relationship with the Nation of Islam as a form of coalition work. Feminists can organize thousands of angry liberal females to march and resist President Trump for his billionaire playboy locker room talk, but they're speechless when it's time to denounce a bigot like Farrakhan. What a bunch of hypocrites. Farrakhan's past extreme comments include praise for Adolf Hitler as a very great man, blaming Jews for the 9/11 attacks, and saying white people deserve to die. The Daily Caller reported that Representative Danny Davis, Democrat from Illinois, previously called Farrakhan an outstanding human being and said he wasn't bothered by Farrakhan's position on the Jewish question. Davis also defended Obama and Farrakhan after a 2005 photo of the two men posing together recently came to light. Now he seems to have changed his position after facing a backlash for praising him. All right, I'll finish this up by Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson when we come back. Going to set you up here. Nicole Deal is standing by in the WBAP newsroom, the very latest breaking news. We'll check your afternoon drive and back to your calls. I'm Rick Roberts, News Talk 820 WBAP. All right, 2:32 the time. I'm Rick Roberts. This is the Court of Public Opinion, your voice, your opinion, your attitude on the issues of the day. And coming up, Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson, we were to have talked to him on Friday. He had a last-minute Fox Television or Fox News Television interview come up in the 11th hour, so to speak. So we're talking with him today. Guns, protest, walkouts. At the end of the day, we're all just trying to figure out how to get along, right? Well, it's very difficult to get along if you separate yourself by race or by political affiliation or by pro-gun, anti-gun. This has got to stop. And taking as mainstream people like Farrakhan, which I've interviewed, is pretty dangerous. I'm reading you the latest, The Final Solution for Farrakhan by Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson. He's the founder of Bond, Brotherhood Organization of a New Destiny, out of Los Angeles. We're going to be talking with him in just a second, not only about this, but about Dylan Roof's sister and whether, in fact, she was treated fairly. I mean, she makes some pretty inappropriate comments. I hope you all get shot today. Oh, wait a minute. Aren't you the sister of a mass murderer? Maybe we got to take a look at this. If that's not a red flag, somebody tell me what a red flag is. Well, she didn't really say she was going to kill anybody, Rick. So we really, okay, I get it. In any case, this is Reverend Peterson's latest piece about Farrakhan on his Savior Day. And by the way, we got to point this out. I think Representative Danny Davis out of Illinois, he's not the only black congressman with ties to what Reverend Peterson calls a dangerous racial agitator. Democrat Representative Keith Ellison of Minnesota, Maxine Waters, of course, of California, Al Green of Texas, Barbara Lee of California, Andre Carson of Indiana, Gregory Meeks of New York. As he writes, all are cozy with Farrakhan and have yet to disavow his hateful rhetoric. Keith Ellison is deputy chairman of the Democratic Party, used to be a member of the Nation of Islam. After being elected to Congress, he attended a dinner along with Farrakhan, hosted by the Iranian president Hassan Rouhani. Representatives Andre Carson, Gregory Meeks also were there. Ellison pretends to distance himself from the Nation of Islam leader, but Farrakhan said Ellison and Carson visited him in 2015. Despite Ellison's awful track record, liberal Jewish groups like the Anti-Defamation League, ADL, and J Street reportedly came to his defense on his past associations. There's another example of how the left puts politics and the acquisition of power above what is the right thing to do. If a Republican congressman were associating with David Duke, these same groups would demand he resign. And they've done that before. Farrakhan and Nation of Islam espouse many bizarre views that teach that whites are inherently the devil, black people are the original people and all other people came from them. Under the leadership of Farrakhan since 1981, the current member of the Nation of Islam holds that their late leader, Elijah Muhammad, did not really die, but was restored to health and is aboard that huge wheel-like plane that's flying over all of our heads. Farrakhan is a con man. He seduces blacks in the black community by conflating Islam's message with Christianity to confuse his blind followers. He tells blacks a little bit of truth to get their attention, but after drawing them in, he switches his message to spew hateful lies about whites, Jews, and America in general. He told the Savior's Day audience, the government is coming for me. And because they can't take it no more, when they come, some of us will fight. Some of us will go to jail. Some of us will be killed. The God I serve can't wait to kill the enemy that has been our enemy for 463 years. The absence of real men and the failure of black lawmakers to stop Farrakhan has led to criticism from across this political spectrum. Representative Todd Rokita from Indiana has done something that no other lawmaker, white or black, has had the courage to do. He introduced a resolution denouncing Farrakhan for promoting ideas that create animosity and anger toward Jews, whites, and others. Farrakhan must be denounced. Congress needs to investigate. Farrakhan's calls for violence, such as the time he called on 10,000 fearless black men to rise up and kill whites. For those seduced and trapped under Farrakhan's influence, whites and Jews aren't your problem. I urge you to pray, forgive your parents for failing you. It's your anger toward your parents that has set you up to fail and seek love from wrong sources. That's from Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson. You know, I was trying to reconcile in my head a timeline. I can never remember a time when law enforcement has been treated so unfairly, has not been supported, has, without even any evidence, being thrown under the bus. I know that's an overused term. Check Ferguson. You know, Eric Holder, a whole constituency from Barack Obama's administration were in Ferguson throwing this guy under the bus. The evidence wasn't even in. They have no forensics were done. Ruined the guy's life. Not a, hey, sorry about that. Nothing. And it continued. New York, Los Angeles, Chicago. You know, we have to rebuild that. But more than that, you know, we got to stop this whole black-white thing. People like Farrakhan, Jesse Jackson, Sharpton, all the rest. You know, if blacks and whites are getting along, those guys are irrelevant. There's nothing for them to do. Do you You know, I've had Jesse Jackson in studio more times than I can count. It's a scam. It's a show. That's what he puts on. I mean, it's. I'm sorry. I have very, very solid beliefs on that because I see what happens behind the scenes. When Jesse Jackson isn't hitting on half the staff, he's making stuff. I've had the new Black Panthers in studio. They wanted to bring their rifles in, of course, without the magazines. And, we go to break. How we doing? We doing all right? I don't know. If you got something to say, say it. We got to stop all this. All right. Let me get to Brad in Capel. Brad, thank you for waiting. How you doing?
I thought I was on vacation.
You thought you were on vacation?
You've been gone so long. I mean, anyway, I just wanted to say, this is what I wanted to say was...
Wait. I've been gone so long? I haven't been gone one day.
No, I've been home 15 minutes.
Oh, you've been on hold. Well, 15 minutes is about right. Okay.
Well, anyway, I just wanted to say that I believe that as long as children are taught, they have history months, African history months, Hispanic history months, Japanese, whatever. There's no white history months. But the thing is, when they're taught history, they're not taught anything about their cultures that were involved in slavery or self-sacrifice or enslaving white people in Africa.
Okay, Brad, I'm lost here. What's your point?
My point is that children are being brought up that white people are always the bad people. And so if you want to, all races get along, then you need to stop it in elementary and high school and junior high.
Okay, well, what is being done in elementary school from your perspective that begins this process of self-segregation? What is it you're talking about?
Well, these history months, for one thing. I mean, are they not Americans or are they all Spanish? I mean, just what are they? Why do they need to know their history and not American history?
Well, we do teach American history.
Are you sure?
Yes, I've taken it. I was in school at that time in Oklahoma. We had Oklahoma history. We had world history.
And what do you? Okay, I want to ask you one thing.
All right.
You can go look at your history books that are 30 and 40 years old, and they're totally different from what they are today, covering the same time frame. So, your history that was taught to you is not what the history is being taught today.
Okay, what is being taught today?
In general, and, I hate to do everything in general,
uh-huh.
but, when they talk about other cultures, they talk about how white people dominated their cultures. They don't talk, there's nothing.
Okay,
really
hold on, Brad, because this is, I'm taking copious notes. Are you an educator?
No.
Okay. Do you have a child of school age that you've looked over their books?
No, I have friends that have white children in minority predominant schools.
Okay, so you're telling me that the history books don't teach anything about white history? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying you have no idea what they're being taught. Their history being taught today is not like anything.
No, well, I do have an idea. I've got kids, and now my daughter has a couple kids, so I've got more than a passing knowledge. I'm sorry, David. Did I miss the boat on this guy or what? Did I not?
I think you were right on. I think he didn't say what he wanted to talk.
Okay, well.
Papa Top again.
All right. 2:43 the time.
Time for one more round.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere, right? Your calls straight ahead. I'm Rick Roberts. News Talk 820 WBAP. All right, 2:48 the time. Glad you're along. Hope you had a great weekend. Welcome back to the Court of Public Opinion. Your voice, your opinion, your attitude on the issues of the day. This is one of those days when I could just keep talking. I got to go to the calls. There's so much, I don't know. You have one of those days when you just seem you can't get it all out. You've got so much to say. You ever had days like that? Oh, this is one for me. Let's go to Barbara in Sherman. Barbara, thanks for waiting. How you doing, Barbara?
Hello, Rick. Thank you for talking about this subject. It's very, very important. And division. I wish that the black community would recognize that they're being used They've been used since Ferguson, Missouri. When I saw that happening, I said, "Oh my gosh, the left, which is code for communists, okay, communism never died. It just vanished for a little while, but it's back with a vengeance." And they just use the blacks to separate from other Americans, to separate the country. And I wish that the blacks would look at this and realize that they're being used.
Barbara, they are. For almost a half century, the black community has voted almost exclusively for the Democrat candidate in just about any race. Didn't happen this time when we elected a new president. And you can't blame them. I mean, what happened to those billions of dollars from my brother's keeper? They make their way into the black community? Did they redo the schools, fill in the potholes, replace the street lights, tear down the crack houses that were abandoned and lower the property value? Did they bring businesses back to the inner city? No. They talked about increasing minimum wage and abortion on demand. Well, minimum wage for what? There's no businesses there. You're correct. And the black community in general turned their back to the Democrats this last election. They didn't go running to Trump. For the most part, they just sat this one out. They're tired of getting a toy at Christmas and a turkey at Thanksgiving and then watching their elected leaders drive out to the suburbs in their new Escalade. I mean, you can only promise somebody something for so long before they say, okay, hang on a second. You keep saying, I should vote for you, not a Republican, because the Republicans somehow, somewhere are going to hurt me and you're going to help me. It's been 50 years. Nothing's changed. So, your concerns are well-founded, but I think the black community as a whole has figured this out. You're seeing more and more and more grassroots organizations trying to bring businesses back, trying to create new infrastructure, trying to do something to better the neighborhoods, because I keep telling you, the federal government can't do it. They won't. There's no incentive. Now, listen to this talk show host for just a second, and I'll get to your call. There's no incentive for the government to do anything or facilitate anything for blacks and whites to get along. Nothing. Well, there is for us because we're neighbors. We live and work and recreate in the same cities. There's no incentive. There's no upside for blacks and whites to get along at a federal level. If you can keep the races separated, then you can more easily manipulate them when it comes to votes. Do you not know that? The federal government is not a benevolent uncle there to get everybody to get along. I mean, once we realize that, then you realize, okay, well, then we'll manipulate the federal government in order to fund the things we need. We can't sit here on our hands and wait for them to do it because they're not going to do it. There's no incentive for them to do it. Barbara, very good call. Very intuitive. Let's go to Greg in Frisco. Greg, thanks for waiting. How you doing, Greg?
I'm doing very good.
Good.
Yes. I'm always basically listening to you every day.
Thank you.
This is my first time to ever call a radio station. But I love the way that you're involved, with educational things like that. I am the son of parents who taught for about 38 years.
Wow.
I'm an old retired Texas high school football coach of 37 years, and I miss my kids. I don't miss the classroom because of what they've done to us, basically turning us into robots. The idea of, turning out the well-rounded student is been basically gone since the early 1980s. Now, the gentleman that spoke a while ago that was trying to speak that you didn't seem to understand, I think because of his phone reception, you missed kind of the things that he first spoke about. And when he was talking about, we have Black History Month, we have a Hispanic History Month, we have, these different history months, that I know what he's talking about there. That's kind of what he was trying to get at. Now,
do you have anything against those things?
No, not at all.
Okay.
The only thing, if we're going to do it, there needs to be equality for all, okay, period. I mean, we need to do it around the whole table. I guess that's the only way I can put it. Now, as far as the history he was talking about, because of the imperial knowledge and experience that I've had through my parents' years, through my 37 years, I've also served on, you wouldn't believe how many curriculum committees. You wouldn't believe how many textbook committees. I also wrote curriculum for a district at one time. It has been done in a certain way to where it's slowly, our traditional history has slowly been evolved stealthily out as not to cause any red flags or, anybody to basically, I guess, call attention to what's going on.
Greg, I understand. I'm up against the wall, Greg, on a hard break, so forgive me for that. But I've been on textbook committees. I was right in the big middle of outcome-based education, getting rid of it. The same thing with Common Core. I understand what you're saying, and that's why I have said for time immemorial, nothing against teachers. I wouldn't have my kids in public school to save my life if they were of school age. I wouldn't do it. Take another job, second job, homeschool, something. But it's more about socializing the child than it is educating the child. And if you don't believe me, listen to some of the archived tapes of these town hall meetings where they were trying to explain that Common Core was a good thing. One of the guys that wrote some of the tenets of Common Core starts off by saying, well, having been born a white male with privilege I didn't earn, I felt it imperative. What? Wait a minute, that's part of socializing society. That's not educating anybody. So I know what you're saying, Greg. I understand it, and perhaps I didn't understand that previous call. Greg, I thank you for the call very much. 2:56 the time. You see him on Fox News, CNN, Newsmax, all over the place. The other Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson, he's up next.
This is the news and talk of Texas. Now, it's the Rick Roberts Show on 820 AM, 99.5 FM, HD2, News Talk 820, WBAP.
Well, I know there's got to be a few 100 million more like me, just trying to keep it free. Yeah.
Rick Roberts starts right now.
All right, 3:04 the time. I'm Rick Roberts. This is the Court of Public Opinion, your voice, your opinion, your attitude on the issues of the day. Now, I have had this guest on before. This is one of those days where I feel like I can't say enough. His site is rebuildingtheman.com, rebuildingtheman.com. I'll have this on my website a little later. His latest book, I don't do authors, but I've known this guy for 20 years. I was honored to be an honorary board member on his organization, Bond. His latest book is called The Antidote, Healing America from the Poison of Hate, Blame, and Victimhood. And if you're looking for a guy that won't pull punches, that will tell you exactly what he thinks, then this is the guy. Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, Ray, how you doing? All is well.
I'm doing good. Listen, I had to talk to you about this. This thing has hit the boiling point. After 8 years of throwing law enforcement under the bus, separating the races, I had a caller just a moment ago, Reverend, something about the government. And I said, look, there's no vested interest. There's no upside in the government trying to bring the races together. We're easier to manipulate for them if we're divided. True or false?
100% true. The government don't want us united as one, because if we were united as one, we would have a better government. They wouldn't be as corrupt. They wouldn't be controlling us in the manner that they are. So they definitely don't want us united. Look what the government has done to not all, but most black people for the last 60 years or so. They have brainwashed, dumbed down, and manipulated, demoralized most black people, and they did that so that they could control them generation after generation. As Lyndon B. Johnson said,
the Democrats will control the blacks for the next 200 years.
You know, I've got a piece on the website, The History of Democrats, Republicans, and Racism Post-Civil War. You know, a lot of people don't even realize that the Democrats created, the Southern Democrats created the KKK to harass freed black men and what they called radical Republicans at the time.
Yeah.
And you know, when LBJ signed that Civil Rights Bill in '65, in his own autobiography, you know, he was touted as, oh, he's a savior to the black community. What did he say? He said, I'll have those N-words voting for Democrats for the next 200 years.
And lo and behold, he was absolutely right. Even today, you have up to 96 to 98% of black people voting for the Democratic Party. We saw it twice with Barack Obama. We just saw it down in Alabama when a good man like Judge Roy Moore ran against a weak Democrat who support illegal aliens and abortion and everything else. The blacks, they went out and they voted him in. And not because he was a good man, but because he was a liberal Democrat with no moral values. And if you notice, Rick, not all, but most black people don't support men and women of values. If you love God, if you love your country, if you love the family, if you believe in putting the country first, they're not going to vote for you. But if you're morally bankrupt, liar, if you are someone that cannot be respected, and you're going to give them free stuff, they will vote for you.
A lot of people, Reverend, they don't really know where you came from. I've tried to explain Bond, the Brotherhood Organization of a New Destiny, and what that was about, what you were able to accomplish. You've got another a site now that I just gave as I introduced you, which I think people ought to go to, rebuildingtheman.com. Tell people where you were and where you are now.
Long story short, I grew up in Alabama. I grew up on a plantation down in Alabama. I grew up under the Jim Crow laws. I was taken out of school twice a year, once to plant the crop and the next time to bring the crops in, harvest the crops. My mother and father didn't get married, but my mother married my stepfather before I was born, because during those days, it was an embarrassment to have children out of wedlock, and she didn't want to have a baby out of wedlock, so she married my stepfather. So I didn't grow up with my father. I had a yearning for my father growing up. My mother tried to turn me away from him whenever I would ask for him or about him. And then, so I had that void in me. I moved to L.A. at 18. I asked God to let me see what was going on with me, and he allowed me to see that I had this anger against my parents. And once that happened, I forgave them. I went to them and forgave them. My mother for trying to turn me away, because the worst thing that can happen to children, no matter boy or girl, no matter what the color is, when you turn them away from their fathers, you turn them away from God, and it leaves an emptiness, and they grow up looking for other things to fulfill that void, and it end up destroying them. But I forgave my parents, and what I did, God forgave me. He took that void away, and I started Bond, the Brotherhood Organization of a New Destiny, and we are rebuilding the family by rebuilding the man, turning men back toward their parents, telling them to forgive their father and mother. And when they do, Rick, God forgive them, we tutor, we counsel. We have an entrepreneur academy now where we're teaching these boys how to start businesses, ages 15 and up. We started a credit union so we can loan them the money, and they pay back the money with interest so we can keep it going. We've not gotten one dime from the government, not one penny, because I believe the less government in your life, the better off you are. It's people helping us to help others. We've been around this past February for 28 years.
Can you believe that?
I know. Isn't that amazing?
That is.
And one other quick point about that, I've proven in my book, The Antidote, Healing America from the Poison of Hate, Blame, and Victimhood, that there's no such thing as racism. It has never existed. It was a lie that was made up by the children of the lie in order to manipulate and control people so that they could get power and wealth. And the children of the lie, the so-called civil rights leaders, the black preachers, the politicians, and the liberal media. Our battle is a spiritual battle, a warfare between good and evil, right versus wrong. And most black men and women hate their mothers, and they're yearning for their fathers. It's not the white person or white people that's the problem. They have not forgiven their mothers for turning them away from their fathers.
All right, I've got to step aside very quickly. When we come back, I said this in my promo before you came on. What do the shooters at Columbine, Sandy Hook, of course, Florida, so many more, what do they have in common? Look at their background. Look at their relationships. Let's talk a little bit about that. But before I step aside, my favorite saying of all time, and this goes back about 20 years. I think you know what I'm talking about. There was a point in time when you and I probably wouldn't have been friends, but that all changed when you realized that white people weren't getting up in the morning, going to the breakfast table and what?
Trying to figure out how they're going to keep the Negroes down today. Pass me the salt, honey.
Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson is my guest, 12 minutes after the hour. Your calls straight ahead. All right, 17 minutes after the hour. With me is Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson. You see him on Fox and Newsmax, just all over the place. His site is rebuildingtheman.com. His latest book, The Antidote, Healing America from the Poison of Hate, Blame, and Victimhood. All right, let's get to it, Reverend. You look at all the school shootings, Columbine. I remember interviewing one of the kids that same day. Columbine, Sandy Hook, and Florida, and there's so many others. But there seems to be a common thread. It's not necessarily that they were bullied. We talk a lot, well, it's guns, what kind of gun? It's not even really about that. It's a human issue. What do all these things have in common as far as the background?
And you're right. It's not about guns at all. It's about bad parenting. These boys and girls are growing up with either one parent in the home, and most of the time it's the mother, or no parents at all. And they're angry about that because they didn't grow up with love. They didn't grow up with a sense of direction in life. They don't know how to handle the issues and challenges that life brings. But when you look at the parenting, and most of the time the fathers are not around, and when you look at their background, they all have that in common so far. And so unless we deal with those issues, you could take every gun away from every citizen of this great nation, and you're still going to have violence happening because it's not the physical thing, it's the heart of the person. And if we don't turn the parents back to the children and children back to the parents, it's going to only get worse, Rick, and not get better.
I put something on the website, hashtag put God in prayer back in schools.
Yeah.
The idea was the country was founded on biblical principles, whether you're a Jew or a Hindu or whatever. Biblical principles work for everyone.
Yeah.
I went to a website, national website, and they had a couple hundred people said, "Oh, I agree." I said, "I can't believe that just those few people care about this." I put it up on my website. We had over 70,000 hits in a week. People care about this, but what the school shootings, Jesse? If the president or anyone else would come to you and said, "Reverend Peterson, how do we get a handle on this from this point forward?" What would you say?
The first thing I would recommend is that we make sure that teachers are armed in the schools, especially those who don't mind being armed, because when potential villains know that there are guns in the schools or in your homes, in your communities, they are less apt to go in and attack you. But if they know it's a gun-free school, it's just going to get worse. There's nothing to stop them from going in there. And then I would focus, there needs to be a major nationwide focus on families. We need to get the families back in order. We also need, as you mentioned, we need to put God back into the public square, back into the public schools, back into the government, back into the homes, and back into the churches. You might be surprised at the number of preachers who don't really promote God and goodness, and they don't tell the truth about what's happening in the homes. And so as a result, it's just going out of control. I have to tell you, Rick, when you don't have God guiding your life, even in your personal life, your life will go out of control. And likewise, when you take him out of the public square, it goes out of control, and that's what's happening right now.
To make an analogy, President Bush advised then President Obama, don't pull out. Don't pull out of Iraq. You're going to create a vacuum that's going to be filled with something even more evil, and we'll have to go back and finish the job. And that's exactly what happened with ISIS. Well, from my way of thinking, when you pull God out of anywhere, you create a vacuum that's usually going to be filled with something you don't like very much. And how much further down this road do we have to go before somebody wakes up?
It's amazing to see this happen over and over and over again. When we saw the shooting down in Florida, the first thing the children of the lie did, and the children of the lie are the liberal media, the Democratic representatives, the right-o Republican, and the Neville Trumpers, they went after the guns. That's so crazy to me. There were no guns in the school. That's why the boy was able to go in there and shoot up the people. Rather than looking at that boy's background, he grew up with adopted parents. His adopted father died when he was very young. His adopted mother died. And apparently he had to go and find a place to live with a friend of his and his parents. And that's no way for a kid to grow up. And instead of focusing on that, and then the school and other people knew about it, and no one did anything to help the boy deal with what he was dealing with. And so instead of being honest about that, they're blaming it on the guns. And that's what the children of the lie do. They turn everything into politics because they are about power and wealth. They're not about the people. They're not about what is right. They're about power and wealth, and they try to get us all emotional lies by showing the incident over and over and over again, and then showing the children who are walking out of the school like we're not going to recognize that those children have been paid and bought for by the liberals who want to take away our rights to bear arms.
Finally, Reverend Peterson, first of all, thanks for coming on. I appreciate that. You know that. By the way, I read your, I read it. I very seldom, as you know, read from a prepared text, but I read the audience, the final solution for Farrakhan just before you came on. Oh man.
Great. Thank you.
I got to tell you, you know, you and I have, I don't know, we've been friends for what, 20 years, maybe longer.
Forever and a day.
I got to ask you, you know, I think in the wake of the 8 years with Obama, and then of course Trump, and I don't always agree with the way he does things, but you know, I think we got a different direction going. I call
him the Great White Hope. Did you know that?
Yeah, I heard that. As a matter of fact, when it comes to the black-white issue, how are we going to take care of this? I mean, I don't ever remember. Of course, I wasn't alive during the civil rights things, but
right.
I mean, how are we going to get a handle on this? I mean, with Black Lives Matter and all these other organizations, you know, if we're left alone, the black and white community left alone, we generally get along pretty good. But you inject politics into it, then all of a sudden we've got division. How do we get a handle on the black-white dilemma we've got in this country?
The first thing we have to do, without a doubt, is we got to tell them the truth. We have to not be afraid to tell black people the truth. And, you know, most blacks are and they seem like nice people, and they are, but niceness is not righteousness. And there's some angry, mean, out-of-control people. Most black people don't believe in God. Even though they go to church, they believe about him. And so they're believing in this lie that racism is holding them back, and it's not. And the politicians and the media pushes that on them all the time. And they believe it because they're angry. And when you're angry, Satan is your father, so it's easy to believe a lie. But we got to tell them the truth. And then at some point, the government got to make them take care of themselves instead of, you know, the working class taking care of all these out-of-wedlock babies, and make the black men and women take responsibility, because they're not going to appreciate individuality and self-reliance until they have to take care of themselves. But most of all, white people got to get over the fear of telling black people the truth. And the truth is, it's not about racism. It's about the lack of moral character, the destruction of their families, and they have been brainwashed and controlled by the Democratic Party and the liberal media.
Yeah, man, I wish we had more time. We got to talk again soon, because I want to get deeper into this. I don't know. You know, I've been doing this for 25 years, but never in that whole length of time have I had such a sense of urgency to try to get to some really solid, useful answers. And I think you can help me with that.
I'll be happy to. I know I can, Rick. We've been working together a long time. We both know what the problem is. We need to get it out there.
Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson has been my guest. If you don't know anything about him or Bond or rebuildingtheman.com, please go there. Rebuildingtheman.com, the latest book, The Antidote, Healing America from the Poison of Hate, Blame, and Victimhood. I know you got a show to do, Reverend, so have a good one.
Thank you, Rick. I appreciate you, man.
All right, take care. 3:26 the time. Your call straight ahead. All right, 3:33 the time. I'm Rick Roberts, the Court of Public Opinion. Your voice, your opinion, your attitude on the issues of the day. Of course, broadcasting each and every day out of Dallas-Fort Worth. WBAP Studios, heard coast to coast. It's toll-free, 1-800-288-WBAP, 1-800-288-9227. My thanks to Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson. This is Bob in Keller. Bob, thanks for waiting. How you doing, Bob?
Rick, how in the wide world of sports are you, my friend?
I'm doing okay, thanks.
Well, I guess had the privilege of being in the room, or somewhat in the room when the NAACP sold its soul to the devil in 1994, I believe it was, during the Benjamin Chavez debacle, or Chavez Mohammed debacle, where they had lost a large portion of their money and their funding, and just so happened at that time that the gay rights movement had a lot of money, and they wanted to in essence to get rid of the most vocal opponent they had to gay rights at that point. Saying all of that, if you look in a historical context, the demise of influence from an organization like the NAACP that was a very good organization. Realize a lot of people didn't agree with them, but at least at that point they had, I think, the best interest of the black community in mind. And I'll never forget the look on Merle Evers' face when she'd been really crying when I came back into the room after they took their vote. And from that point forward, you saw the NAACP move in a far more left direction and forget far more about the rights of their members and really what they were created to do, to advance black people in the United States. Now what we have is, as you know, is they're ineffective and they're almost laughed at in the community.
Well, did you hear what, I think his first name is Derek, I could be wrong on that, his last name's Johnson. He's president and CEO of NAACP. I think he's out of Baltimore. Did you hear what he asked the federal government to do week before last?
I have not heard that.
He asked that the federal government confiscate every single firearm in America and move us to an Australia-type gun control situation. And I had to reread it twice to make sure that I didn't miss something. It was like...
it doesn't really surprise me, but you have to look at how far to the left that the NAACP has been trying to move their political agenda. And as we know, just looking back at history, the Democratic Party has done them no good. I mean, it's 50 years of platitudes and chicken or a gift at Christmas or whatever. They've not moved forward. And instead, to come in and fill the vacuum, you have these things like Black Lives Matter and some of these more radical organizations that come in here and, in essence, hijack the cause, as I see it.
No, I think you're right. I think you're NAACP, if I say teachers union, National Teachers Union, you think of kids and learning, and they're lobbyists or anything but. They're far, far to the left. NAACP, the same thing. It seems like every time human beings allow politics to become the order of the day, we always end up with a short end of the stick. I mean,
sure.
I don't talk a whole lot about my upbringing, but because people say, oh, that wasn't the way to. But I wouldn't change it for the world now. I didn't really acknowledge racism as a term. I played football at Vian Wolverines, little town out in eastern Oklahoma, where I lived at a Methodist boys ranch. And my best friend was JC. JC, I won't give his last name, but he was a black guy. And we were, I don't know what we were doing, selling candy bars or selling something for the Booster Club. And we walked into it was the county seat, and we walked into the court, I guess, what do you call it? Court building, where, you go in one side and go around the building, go out the other. And we walked up the stairs, and okay, JC, you take that side and I'll take this side. And right in front of us, they didn't even bother to take a screwdriver and take two screws out. It had white and colored, but they were painted over with white paint, but you could still read them because they were those kind of metal signs that are pushed out. I don't know what you call them, and it was like, for the first time, we looked at each other, and for the first time it was like, wow, that's messed up. And then, forever, then you pick up on things. As a society, we do pretty good until we let political affiliation or other things separate us.
Sure, and let me close with this. I was recently at probably one of the largest Martin Luther King Day events in the country. The first half of the program was something that I remember akin to the NAACP rallies and things like that from the 60s and early 70s. The whole dynamic changed when the politicians came in.
Yep.
It converted to a near hate speech, which didn't do anything to the cause or the remembrance of Martin Luther King.
Look, you're right. You're absolutely right. Martin Luther King has been used as a facade by so many groups shouting legitimacy. I've lost count. I mean, if you read Martin Luther King's writings, it's moving. I mean, it truly is. But then you put it on a Black Lives Matter rally, and all of a sudden it becomes something much different.
And they in essence, they don't want, those type of groups don't want a Martin Luther King approach to our racial situation and our discord in this country.
That's true. That is true.
They want to move toward an Antifa style, open rebellion. 1963, I happened to get off the bus in Watts in the middle of the biggest riot that they'd had there in ever.
Your timing's great.
Yeah, I mean, it was. And I came from Oklahoma on the bus. So, and like you, I'm a ex-ranch boy.
Well,
but anyway, God bless you.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate it. Some good insight. If I were to ask you, I'm the government. Okay, how do I boil this down? The government can't keep your kids safe in schools. That's been proven time and time again. Well, if there weren't any guns, that's like saying if there weren't any oxygen. If there's no oxygen, the government can't keep your kids safe in schools. The government, hell, they can't even run the DMV. You really think the government's going to come up with a way to facilitate the races in society coming together and putting whatever our differences are, whatever they may be, aside? You really think, number one, there's no incentive for them to do that. There's no upside. It makes their job tougher. If you can split everybody up into short, tall, fat, thin, black, white, if you can do that, then you can usually control it. No galvanized voices to come against you, no pushback. You know, what the Democrats have done with the black community is almost a crime in the last half century. All you have to do is read about it, not because I say so. White supremacist, we had shunned them almost into oblivion before last year before last. And then, of course, we made, just like kids, if you make anything a big deal, they view it as such. If I were to ask you, how can the races get along without any political input, without any government input? Think about that for a second. That's tough, isn't it? What can we do as individuals, black, white, doesn't matter. What can we do as individuals to bring the races together where we can live peacefully without this hate and strife and preconceived notion? What can we do other than ask the government at any level, city, county, state, federal, take that away, all right? Here's the test. Take all the government action or interaction, take that away. What can we do as individuals to better get along in this country? Because we all have to live here. And the only thing we do by fighting each other is help politicians. That's all we do. What can we do? Do you have an answer to that? 1-800-288-WBAP, 1-800-288-9227. This should be interesting. Your call straight ahead in the court of public opinion. All right, 3:50 the time. Question was, it's not easy. I get that. If you take government at every level, city, county, state, federal, take them out of the equation because they've already proven, not because they're mean-spirited necessarily, you just can't do it. Government wasn't designed to do that. Government wasn't designed to crawl into the hearts and minds of men and instruct them to do things. I mean, government is very pragmatic. Put this widget on that. I mean, you see what I'm saying? So without government involvement, how do you bring the races together in this country? Can't ask any level of government for any help. How do you do it? John in Fort Worth. John, thank you for waiting. I appreciate it. How you doing, John?
Good. And you, Rick?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Did you have a good weekend?
Good. Oh, yeah. Just cleaned house. Anyway, it's basically what I learned in the military. You treat everybody with respect, and you get respect back. Well, so I was an officer. I was in the Marines.
Right at the top of the list. You're right.
I was in the Marines and in the Air Force as an officer, and I treated like my troops, like like they were. You're an adult. They were like children. That's a bad analogy, but I mean, you took care of them. You looked after their needs and stuff, and then you got a lot of respect out of that.
John, do you? Maybe this is too esoteric. We are at a point, John, in society where we're trying to make everyone the same. All right? Women are the same as men. Men are the same as women. If everybody's the same, then we'll get along. No, you'll never get along doing that. We are different. Women are different than men. Men are different than women. I'm not talking about equal pay for equal jobs. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the fact that we're created differently. Forgive me for saying this. If you're transgender, transsexual, tricycle, whatever it is you are, don't have kids. You shouldn't have kids. You got your own boat to row in figuring out what you are. Don't bring somebody else in and compound the problem. When it comes to men and women, we are different. Stop trying to ignore the fact that we're different. No, I saw something on television over the news or a documentary about, we're wanting to make sure that Johnny has plenty of dolls to play with if he wants to explore that side of himself. The kid's 5 years old. What does he know about that? No, raise little boys like boys. Raise little girls like girls. And if she wants to climb a tree, that's fine. If he wants to sit and pet the cat, that's fine, but stop trying to manipulate gender. That's number one. If you don't respect and accept who you are as a person, you can't give anybody any respect. John, good call. I appreciate that very, very much. Let's go to Dee in Burleson. Dee, thank you for waiting. How you doing, Dee?
I'm good. How are you, Rick?
I'm good, thanks.
I believe that the division in this country is partially due to the fact that they have taken God out of absolutely everything. God tells us to love our neighbor as ourselves.
Biblical principle.
Like a good solution.
Biblical principle. And I don't care if you're a Muslim or Hindu or Jewish or Christian, it doesn't matter. Biblical principles work for every religion.
Amen.
And you're right. I don't know about this God thing, Rick. Okay, you don't have to. Restore biblical principles and everything will be fine. Just like you said. D, treat your neighbor as yourself. Biblical principles work. Doesn't matter what theologies you subscribe to or whether you are a total atheist. It doesn't matter. Look at the biblical principles. That's not too bad. Yeah, but Rick, I'm a Hindu. Doesn't matter. I'm a Jew. Doesn't matter. Rick, I don't believe in a higher deity. Doesn't matter. Biblical principles work for everyone. Absolutely everyone. And if you remove God and biblical principles from society, you create a vacuum that's going to be filled with what? What's it been filled with? Think about it. Schools, as Reverend Peterson said, the public square, media. Once you remove biblical principles and God from life, you created a vacuum. What filled that vacuum?
This is the news and talk of Texas. Now, it's the Rick Roberts Show on 820 AM, 99.5 FM, HD2, News Talk 820, WBAP.
Well, I know there's got to be a few 100 million more like me, just trying to keep it free. Yeah.
Rick Roberts starts right now.
4:04 the time. I'm Rick Roberts. This is the Court of Public Opinion, the Rick Roberts Show on News Talk 820 WBAP. You may have noticed Eric Bushman is away today. Nicole Deal running the train in the WBAP newsroom. It's nice to have Nicole along. So, Nicole, good job. And again, my thanks to Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson, who was on with us a little earlier. I asked the question. You can't ask the government for help. Can't ask them for help. City, county, state, federal, sorry. Got to do this one on your own. How do you bring the races together in America when the media, politicians, and so many other people are fighting to keep us separated? How do you do it? I've said biblical principles need to be returned to school. As a matter of fact, you go to the Facebook, WBAP Facebook, and you scroll down, you'll see hashtag put God and prayer back in schools. I don't know what the numbers are on that. It's over 70,000, I think.
Let me look that up right now.
A lot of people care about that. Biblical principles work no matter who you are or what theology or any theology you subscribe to. Respect your father and mother. That works for a Jew as well as it works for a Christian. You must not commit murder. I'd say that works for just about everybody, doesn't it? By the way, no, Rick, it's thou shalt not kill. No, the Hebrew translation is thou shalt not murder. You must not commit adultery. I think just about everybody agrees with that, don't they? You must not steal. I don't know of a theology out there that come to church on Sunday, steal everything you can. No. You must not give false evidence against your neighbor. In other words, don't lie about what's going on. Who's against that? Don't be envious of your neighbor's goods. You shall not be envious of his house, nor his wife, or anything that belongs to him, not yours. Who would argue with that? By the way, those are 10 commandments, not all 10, but a few. Who would argue that, well, no, I don't want any of that religion stuff. You're trying to push God down my throat. Well, so you would argue with do not commit murder? No, I agree with that. What about committing adultery? No, I wouldn't do that. Is it okay to steal? Oh, absolutely not. You see what I'm saying? You understand? All right, let's go to your calls. John in Fort Worth. John, thank you for waiting. How you doing, John?
I'm good, Rick, man. I was telling your call screener that this is almost an impossible question. And really, it's an impossible question, even if you do introduce the government as some sort of, component that could help in the process. I think we're too far gone. Really, the thread that started breaking this up is when we started going down this road, and you had Jesse Lee Peterson on. He said something that, we all know, but, he said that back in those days it was frowned upon, no matter really what religion you were, but just in society in general, it was frowned upon to have a child out of wedlock.
Right.
So those things are gone. And the only way that and those are the threads, right? Everybody could disagree on different points back then, but you had a base where you started from, right? You had country, you had different things.
Right.
That base is torn apart, it's gone, and I don't see how you get that back unless you hit the reset button. And we have to do things because as conservatives, we're intellectually honest people. But unfortunately, as I go through this, I keep thinking intellectual honesty is just it's not gonna serve us right now. Right now, we have to look at this as all out, and I don't want to use the word war in such a way that there's got to be deaths or anything, but it's a war of ideas. We've got to start doing things in such a way that we win the hearts and minds of people that we typically don't think of winning the hearts and minds. Instead of bashing these college people and making fun of them and saying you guys are weak-minded or this or that the other, we need to start looking at reaching out to them, the minorities, instead of saying, look, stop getting on this government program and get up and work. We need to find ways to be able to speak their language and convince them. And it's not going to work for everyone. I get it. And what I'm saying, honestly, I have to convince myself every day that that's even a possibility. But without that, we're really spiraling into chaos. And unless we get something back, I mean, the only other option is the Hail Mary option, and it's probably one that's more comical than anything else, is a lot of these issues are being raised by millennials. And really the problem the millennials have, we created in baby boomers and myself, which is Generation X. And these people obviously go and protest. They don't commit to jobs. They don't commit to values and morals because they know that they have the safety net of their parents. So maybe the Hail Mary in this is if those parents wake up, my generation, Generation X, and baby boomers wake up and stop providing for them whenever the proverbial what hits the fan. And so for me, I don't. Again, all very low possibility options, but I just don't see it. I think it's an impossible question, and we need to hit a reset button. We need to have something that brings us together, like 9/11. I hope nothing that tragic. But as a lot of people say, and a lot of psychologists will say, people don't change after the age of 25. And the only chance that you have of changing after the age of 25 is a traumatic event. That's really it.
Let me respond because you've made some good points. First of all, this is not an either or type thing as far as hoping to elect your political affiliation, whether it's the White House or anything else. I put my spiritual life above my political life. I put it above everything. So, from that standpoint, I can't say that it's over with. Now, as a societal baseline, you might be right. There's no shame any longer. There's no consequence for action any longer. Political correctness has pretty much obliterated any decency, or as my grandmother used to say, decorum in the country. I'll give you that. But that's a society. A society can shift and change and morph into other things. You can't tell me that that's gone in people's hearts and minds. Maybe not everyone. Maybe not so much in one generation versus another. But I know in the hearts and minds of men and women, those things still exist. Shame still exists. If you sin, you don't go bragging about it. You try to cover it up, don't you? So from that aspect, I believe that shame exists, consequence for action exists, responsibility exists. It's just no longer a societal baseline, because liberalism has pretty much told generation after generation, it doesn't matter what you think or what you do, or it's all okay, as long as it's okay with you. And you and I both know from an intelligence standpoint, that's not true. And there are enough, I believe, mothers and fathers out there that have imparted that wisdom to their children. So to say all is lost, I don't concur with that. Now, if you're speaking purely political, then that's a whole different conversation. But I think the politics perhaps would work itself out if we took it down off the altar and stopped making the new theology, the new religion, politics and political affiliation. If you did that and got things back in order as far as, where your spiritual life is, where your secular life is, I think the other would work itself out. Good call. I appreciate it. 12 minutes after the hour. I'm Rick Roberts. News Talk 820 WBAP. All right, 18 minutes after the hour. This is Hank. Hank, thank you for waiting. I appreciate it. Without the government's help, any level of government, how do we bring the races back together?
Solution. There's no silver bullet, and it's been, like you say, 3 generations or so that the liberal views that put us where we are right now as far as generations. So in order to bring things back to the way they probably should be, I think is community has got to be involved in it. And I say that from the matter of child rearing, from the standpoint of preschool, day school aspects. I think community has got to get involved from the standpoint of establishing co-ops. 1 day a week, a parent gives up time to parent, really, those kids in the formative ages from 2 to 6 or 12, while their neurons are starting to get pumped up, and giving them a base, and who more than a parent to be involved in a community aspect of day school or community theater or any of the other outlets go. And that kind of goes back.
Well, I think what you're talking about is, self-segregation to a degree. I mean, there's certain parts of Dallas, as you well know, you don't go to at night. Why? Because you're a white guy. And as soon as they see a white guy, they're going to think you're up to something. Same thing for black people. Certain neighborhoods you don't go to after dark because you're a black guy. Hey, what's a black guy doing in this neighborhood? It works both ways. But if you're black and you're looking for the government to fulfill their promises, forget it. It's not going to happen. Where did all those billions of dollars of my brother's keeper go? Didn't go to your neighborhood, did it? Didn't buy more books for your predominantly African-American school, did it? I know, I've substituted in those schools. They don't have enough books to go around, don't have enough paper, don't have any teaching aids, and the roof leaks. Quit telling me, vote for me, I'll take care of things. Well, how about fixing the school or the potholes or the abandoned crack houses so the property values can go up? I got an idea. How about bringing jobs back to those communities? To do that, you're going to have security, you're going to have training. Nobody wants to open a business in a war zone. But let's face it, ain't no white guys selling crack on the corner at midnight. White guys aren't walking into the projects, urinating in the halls and spraying graffiti. You know that. I can't say anything because, he lives in the neighborhood. Well, then you're doomed to live that way forever. We've got to start helping each other out. The government's not going to come, let me take care of the potholes. Let me take care of not enough books. Let me take care of the abandoned crack houses. Let me take care of that's what they'll tell you when they're looking for your vote. And then after they're elected, nothing happens. I remember gosh, well, longer than I want to recall. I was at the other radio station. They were in the ballpark at the time. You may remember the KKK burned down a couple black churches. Within 2 hours, we had enough volunteer material and labor. We rebuilt those 2 black churches and had enough left over to build a third one. You know, it takes that kind of community involvement to get anything done. You know, you could still be making phone calls to the government. Hey, you think you can help me out here? They're not going to help you out. All right. Now, see, I'm just too late in the day for me to go off on a rant. Let's go to Bob. Bob, thank you for waiting. I appreciate it. How you doing, Bob?
I'm doing better than yesterday and not as good as tomorrow.
Oh, there you go.
Your question, and nobody has, in my opinion, quite answered it, and I'm not sure I have all the answers, but your question required action and not philosophical things about what we should do and what we should do as parents and all that. You said, what can we do without government? And so I've come up with a short idea.
All right.
And frankly, I've been thinking about it for a long time, but I haven't taken action yet. And that is that we need action. And it needs to be based on this. Do unto others as you want them to do unto you.
Okay. That sounds pretty radical right there.
That, you start putting different things in line that you stand for and that you want to do, and make it sort of like Black Lives Matter, but give it a name. I don't know. I hadn't thought this all the way through. It's black and white people. You know, it's just say people matter.
Well, all lives matter. I mean, I get that. You know, I mean, in this, soundbite society that we live in, unless you can get it in 30 seconds or in a half a paragraph, you're bored and you move on. Do unto others, sounds like a biblical principle or golden rule to me. I mean, all those things work. They worked for generations until we got so progressive. We got too hip for the room. Well, as long as it's not on my doorstep, I'm not going to worry about it. Well, it's down the street and it's headed your way. It boggles my mind. And the kids that are protesting gun violence, perfect example of what the government absolutely wanted. They didn't want critical thinkers. They don't want pushback on whatever they say. They poured out of the schools, and what did they say? Government, fix this. So you and I have been around a little bit longer. We realize government can't do anything. But they've convinced an entire generation all they have to do is cry towards D.C. and somehow magically, I guess, somebody's going to wave a magic wand and all the problems are going to be gone. What happened to self-reliance? What happened to helping out your neighbor or your community? Or what happened to us, man? What happened to us? Government can't do a damn thing. All right, 4:33 the time. Welcome, the Court of Public Opinion, the Rick Roberts Show. I realize it's a tough question, and that's not why I ask it. I ask it because it's a question we're going to have to answer as a society. Black, white, man, woman, doesn't matter. I challenge any TV news station in the Dallas-Fort Worth area that may be listening to, and first of all, if you're listening, thank you. But I challenge any of you, on your coverage of school shootings or violence in schools, instead of, forgive me, but instead of taking the easy way out, well, let's see, let's get some B-roll, that's film, of AK-47s. Let's do that. This is the type of gun that was used to murder so many AK-47s are maybe a long shot down a pistol range where people are firing. And I challenge any of the TV news stations that are listening to me right now, try to focus on the root problem. Maybe show me some video of a 13-year-old by himself because he doesn't have any friends for whatever reason, sitting on his back porch with the dog staring at the backyard. Or maybe show me a couple of teenagers in a darkened bedroom because they never come out, have any interaction with their parents, and like Adam Lanza, the Sandy Hook school shooter, show him playing a computer game called School Shooting, in which the player enters a school and randomly fires on students and teachers. Lanza gunned down his own mother in his home and then killed 20 children and 6 adults. And he did it after playing school shooting video. You know, give me a shot of that. Give me a list of those type of video games. I know it's tough. It's much tougher. It's a lot easier. Go get me like 30 seconds B-roll of an AK-47, and we'll put a graphic underneath it. There we go. There's the news story for the day. Go seek out those kids that are sitting by themselves outside. Where are their friends? Who do they communicate with? Who do they interact with? Go to a video store or some of these websites where you purchase these kind of videos and give me a list of those. Show me, like I said, a darkened bedroom with a couple kids sitting in there playing those games for hours on end. That's where the problem is. It's not with the hardware, it's with the software. All right, let's go to Jimmy in Dallas. Jimmy, thank you for waiting. How you doing, Jimmy?
I'm doing fine. Actually, my solution to your question is actually a 4-phased process. First of all, we do need to get God back in school. Second of all, we need to get rid of government help, period. Third thing is we need to get rid of false narratives such as Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton. And then the third thing is we need to control our immigration, illegal immigration, because these people come in and they don't assimilate. But back to the false narratives of Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton, I feel like personally that race tensions were almost a thing of the past before the previous administration. And all Barack Obama did was fuel their narrative and add power to their false narrative.
Well, to some extent, you're right. I mean, he certainly didn't help. Those people that are looking for racism are going to find it every single day. Those people that espouse racism every time a cloud comes up in the sky, then they're going to find it no matter what, even on a clear day. But this is crazy. This is nuts. There's no difference between black people and white people other than the social mores they've been raised with or given by their political leaders or so-called leaders. And it's got to change. And government's not going to change it. Your state's not going to change it. You're not going to change it unless you try in a concerted way to say, okay, look, government can't even run the DMV. I tell you what, pack a sandwich, maybe an orange or an apple, and a drink, and go sit out in your car and look at the DMV some Thursday afternoon. You want those people running your health care? You want the people responsible for that charged with bringing the races back together in a cohesive fashion? It's not going to happen. Never has. All right. Good call. I appreciate it very much, Jimmy. Don't be a stranger. Let's go to Matthew. Matthew and Ennis. Matthew, thank you for waiting. How you doing, Matthew?
I'm doing just fine. Multiple caller, first-time listener. I'm sorry. Wait. Sorry.
I got you. That's pretty sad. I understand what you say, isn't it?
Right. I know. So like I told your call screener, so if we could just go back to being family, because I remember I'm a Gen Xer, so you go back to 1978, 79, right before high school. I lived in a mixed neighborhood in Oak Cliff over by Polk Street, I guess, Peace Park, whatever. And I know that my African-American friends, their parents would tell my parents what I was doing, or vice versa. And so if we can get back to the family and just get the government out of it, because the government always just messes everything up.
Okay, stop. Wait, stop right there, Matthew. I don't want you to run over something too quickly. You said, and I'm quoting what you just said, if we could get back to the family and leave the government out of it. You have correctly highlighted the problem. Too many people of all colors did exactly what the government was trying to do and has been trying to do for some time. I'm not one of these, people sitting in the basement, preppers or because the government's coming. I'm not a sky is falling kind of guy. The government sought to be the family for Americans. If they could do that,
right,
they could stay in charge of you, control your vote forever, and too many people gave up that ability. We need to go back to the family. Forget the government.
That's right. Right, that's cradle to grave.
Yes.
I'm going to tell you what to do, cradle to grave. I don't like that. And so the way I rose, my children, I have 2 grown children, right? They're on their own, and what they did was they take their own responsibility for whatever happens. If they make a bad mistake or a bad decision, they take that and own it and move on to the next step. But right now, it's like, I got the safety net. The government will take care of me. I can go and apply for, Section 8. I can apply for WIC or welfare or whatever.
No, you're exactly right. The government has ceased to do what the Founding Fathers charged it to do. And that first circle of protection for the American people, the second was the states. They've ceased. That was boring. They weren't making any money. They couldn't, they couldn't grow in size and scope unless they got more people dependent on it. Well, how do we do that? Give them stuff. If they get stuff, then they won't do it themselves. We become the family. That's exactly what happened. Exactly. All right. And speaking of that, stop politicizing the sex of childhood. What's the sex of childhood? I'll tell you next. All right, 4:46 the time. Glad you're along. I'm Rick Roberts. This is the Court of Public Opinion on News Talk 820 WBAP. I'm glad you're with me today, this Monday. I hope you had a good weekend. My thanks to Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson for joining us for a while. The question is a very difficult question. I don't think it's impossible, but it's probably one of the most difficult questions you'll hear. Without any government involvement, because once the government gets involved, it ceases to become about you and me, and it becomes about them. At a city level, county level, state level, or federal level. How do we bring the races back together without the animosity and the perceptions, real or perceived? How do you do that? Take government, and I will say this, taking government out of the equation makes it easier. Because the government is there for one reason only, to divide us. And I'm not saying that there's a bunch of people in government trying to figure out, how do we get them? But that's essentially the end result. I'm not a conspiracy nut, but I do believe there's a concerted effort in government to increase in size and scope. You need more people dependent on you, don't you? You need more people dependent on government benefits, don't you? Well, that's what I'm talking about. How do we bring the races together and leave the government out of it? It will be their worst nightmare. Brian in Burleson. Brian, thank you for waiting. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Rick. I just want to say I had a simple thought on how to get the government out of our lives, and that was to get them to self-destruct under their own laws. If you had the IRS write a law that said that doctors could write off one-to-one any medical care that they gave for free, then there would be no need for Medicare, Medicaid, and other things, because they would be able to keep all their money and they would be able to write it off one-to-one. It seems like a pretty simple solution, but if you can take their very laws, especially the one of grabbing our money and take it out of their hands and put it back in our hands, then they don't have any way to fund themselves.
Well, okay, that's a different dynamic than how do we bring the races together. But Once you take the
But
government,
that doesn't bring them together.
no,
though.
I follow you. That once you take the government out of the equation, it becomes much simpler, doesn't it?
Well, it becomes us taking care of ourselves. I mean, then you've got
Self-reliance.
taking care of a white kid, vice versa. You're taking care of your own community, and that's what it was about at one time. And it just, to your point, it got away to where government was the solution to everything. So, but it's always grown with the dollar amount. If they give them $1, they figure out a way to spend $2.
No, you're right. You're right. Absolutely right. That was the purpose of this whole show. I'm tired of government at every level trying to divide the races. And that's what they do. They try to divide the races. As long as they can keep us separate, then, hey, they can cater to this group one day, cater to that group the next day. Government had a very defined role in this nation. Go back and read the founding. What the founding fathers had to say. They were very defined. They had no idea, the founders, that is, had no idea that government would sprawl into every nook and cranny of the private sector into our lives. It was never supposed to do that. As a matter of fact, they wrote the Constitution so it wouldn't do that, because that's what they came from. Let me bring up one other thing. We need to stop politicizing gender in schools. I'm sorry. Gender is now a filthy word. Female and male. Oh, it's a filthy word. And the sex you are assigned at birth is something to be questioned, evidently. No, it's not. That's who you are. Well, I want to be something else. Okay, be something else, but don't give me some esoteric, psychological, free to be you and me. Well, I was born that way. No, you weren't born that way. You chose to be that way. And if you're transsexual, transgender, don't have kids. You're just compounding the problem. We diligently scour the planet for problems when there are none. You were born a man, but I feel like a woman. Okay, well, pretend to be a woman, I guess. But don't tell me you were born that way. Maybe I'm stating the obvious. When it comes to kids, aren't girls content to be girls, boys happy to be boys? But not if the cultural dictates and minority sexual activists have their way. Then that's no longer normal. Because you can't have a normal if anything's okay. You see what I'm saying? We're surrounded by critics determined to dismantle conventional youth self-discovery to satisfy some kind of off-center adult agenda to embrace and fix things that aren't broken, for crying out loud. But I don't feel good. I don't either. Take some Pepto. I don't know. Go to Fred in Bridgeport. Fred, thank you for waiting. How you doing, Fred?
Hey, pretty good, Rick. How are you?
Good.
I've got a kind of unique perspective on this because I used to have a pest control company in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. When we first started out, we were broke, and we'd take money from anybody. And I ended up with a contract from HUD, Housing and Urban Development, to do all the projects in Dallas-Fort Worth. And my employees would tell me, I don't care if you fire me, I'm not going out there. And I did them by myself for over 3 years. You cannot imagine how these people treat each other. I used to come home with a long face, and my wife would tell me, you've got to quit doing these places. It's killing you. And I'd tell her, what would you think if I came home with a whole truckload of little kids? Because to get them away from these people, multi-generational welfare recipients, not only did they not have jobs, they didn't even know anyone who had a job. You can't imagine. I could tell you stories that you wouldn't believe, so I won't even tell you.
No, I would believe you. I would believe you. I mean, man's inhumanity to man, whether it's a superficial level or the Holocaust. Nobody can screw us up like ourselves. We got to stop this. We got to stop identifying by political affiliation. I don't care if you're a Democrat, if you're a decent guy and live next door and don't ask to borrow my tools, we're good. You know, we've got to stop this. Boys are boys, girls are girls. They're different, and they should be. We ought to be celebrating our differences, not trying to eradicate them. Well, there is no gender. There is no male. There is no female. Who you been talking to? You know, we have to stop this. We have to quit. We have to stop being pawns of government at every level. We got to start treating each other like we want to be treated. I'm not through with this, but I am for today. Mark Levin, he's next. I'll be back with you tomorrow at 2. Your afternoon drive. God's blessings on each and every one of you. Whether we agree or not, that's always my priority. I'm Rick Roberts. See you tomorrow at 2.
Farm towns where they hit it hard till the sun goes down. Nobody really seemed to care that we were living in the middle of nowhere. We just figured that's how it was, and everybody else was just like us, soaking in the rain, baking in the sun. Don't quit till the job gets done. That's the only way I know. Don't stop till everything's gone. Straight ahead and never turn around. Don't back up, don't back down. A full throttle, wide open. You get tired and you don't show it. Dig a little deeper when you think you can't dig no more. That's the only way I know. That's the only way I know. That's the only way I know. The only way I know. Oh, get on it one time.